Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and this is part 7 of my series on Winfield Scott Hancock. And although the good general has distinguished himself in battle thus far, I believe that Chancellorsville demonstrates to the rest of the army how good of a commander that Hancock really is. After the debacle at Fredericksburg, Hancock would get a leave of absence to go visit his wife and children in St. Louis. Therefore, he missed out on Burnside's Mud March. He would rejoin his command in the spring of 1863 and diligently went back to work preparing his men for upcoming engagements. Hancock loved for his troops to drill on the division's parade ground. He also took great pleasure in streaming together cuss words at his brigade commanders if a mistake was made during the drill. General Samuel K. Zook became the focus of the division commander's rants, more so from playful bantering because Zook had no problem throwing the swear words back at his commander, and the two grew closer through their little squabbles on the parade ground. In early 1863, Abraham Lincoln changed commanders, this time to General Joseph Hooker. Hooker was a meticulous organizer, which helped place the army in better standing. For instance, he revamped the leave system, which allowed the individual soldiers to know when their leave of absence would be. This ultimately decreased desertions, since the troops knew when to expect a break and to see their family and rest. He also implemented the insignias for the different corps. Hooker did a lot of good for the army, and in April he launched his advance against Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia. The Southerners occupied Fredericksburg, so Hooker split his army, leaving 3 corps to guard the Rappahannock near that town, and the rest of the army would move across the river and the Rapidan at multiple locations. Once on the other side, Hooker's men would march east and trap Lee and his army between 2 halves of the army. At least that was the plan. It was a good plan. He even took Lee by surprise, who had already divided his force by sending General Longstreet and some of his troops south. Lee was now outnumbered, and the Union Army was now taking advantage. The aggressiveness of Hooker was paying off. The Union corps moved through the dense forested area known as the Wilderness and emerged from it on the River Road, the Turnpike, and the Plank Road. But by this point, Lee was aware that Hooker was on the move, and again split his force, leaving around 10,000 men to guard Fredericksburg, while the rest marched west to confront Hooker. General Sykes' men first encountered Lafayette McLaws' men along the Turnpike. The tough resistance destroyed the confidence of Hooker, and he ordered all of his corps to pull back to the Wilderness and the Chancellorsville area, choosing to remain in the difficult terrain that made his numbers negligible compared to the open ground just to the east. Hancock and his corps commander, General Couch, pleaded along with others to press on, but there was no change in Hooker's decision. The aggressiveness had faded, and now he was on the defensive. Hancock's men dug in at the center of the Union line near the community of Chancellorsville. Lee's bluff had worked, and he and his right-hand man, General Stonewall Jackson, hatched a bold plan. Since Hooker was not going to move, this provided an opportunity to strike the Union Army's right flank, guarded by the 11th Corps under Oliver Otis Howard. Jackson moved 3 divisions around the Union Army and launched that assault. At about 5 p.m. on May 2nd, the Confederates launched their assault on the Union right flank. As it crumbled, McLaws launched his own attacks against Hancock's division. The Pennsylvanian held out after multiple attacks by the Southerners. To make things worse for the Union Army, Hooker, at his headquarters at the Chancellorsville Mansion, got hit in the head and back by a fallen pillar struck by an artillery shell. He was dazed the rest of the fight, but thoroughly convinced he was surrounded and outnumbered, when in reality much of his line was holding firm, especially the 2nd Corps. Intimidated by the heavy assaults against his line, Hooker assembled some defenses but ultimately ordered for the withdrawal of his forces back across the Rapidan and Rappahannock rivers. However, the Southerners were still pressing in on the Union defenders. At one point, Winfield was fighting a foe in front of his position and behind his position as he guarded the roads to the fords. General Jeb Stuart had taken over for Jackson after the wounding of Stonewall, and the young Cavalier was pushing hard against the Union line, but Hancock doggedly held on for dear life, directing his troops from horseback. As cannonballs and bullets whizzed by him, he never flinched. He was focused on allocating his troops where they were needed. Finally, Hancock was able to safely get his men across the rivers and be known as the saviors of the Union Army. Historian, historian, where do you roam?
Historian, historian, far, far from home. Have history will travel reads the card of a man. A professor with knowledge in the heartland. To educate the world is his mission. A professor of fortune is a man called historian. Historian.